This is Nasha Kasha, a Ukrainian almanac. 28 minutes of stories for everyone about Ukrainian life. I'm your reporter Stefan Andrusiak. This is episode 298. All events and characters in today's episode are based on a true story. My dearest Marta, I left you. I can imagine how upset with me you are. But I again state that duty called me. I ask you to now soften your heart in this matter. True, it is not the kind of duty that sends men off to war, and as sure as I sit here now, war is coming to our land. When last November Germany signed its pact with Italy and Japan, and Hitler has already poked his nose into Austria, his boots are sure to follow. And the communists, what of them? They will first make our fields their own, and then we will be put to work on those fields. And what of the Poles, who rule us now but can barely tolerate us? When my brother Pavlo sent word to accompany his girls here, I, who am the guardian of his now motherless children, was duty-bound to fulfill his wishes, to reunite them with their father here in Argentina. And I now write you that finally, blessedly, we are here, healthy and safe. The port of this capital is what I imagine the rest of this country to be: warm, reasonably prosperous, welcoming. Pavlo and I have dreamt of some place in the sun like this for as long as we can remember. Argentina's strong ties with England mean it will prosper. Still, its leader shows strength, and I understand they will want no part of any far-off European war. There were surprisingly few formalities when we entered this country, and although I cannot understand a word of this foreign tongue, they quite effectively communicated to me that we should wait not far from where we disembarked from our ship, the Asturias. 3 hours later, we were met by a Polish-speaking Argentinian, who I suspect works unloading trunks and imported goods from these many vessels. He said his name was Stanislas, but he would speak little of himself, giving one the sense that he has met tens, perhaps hundreds like me, with hat in hand, seeking direction and basic answers. I told this Stanislas that my brother was to have met us yesterday, but as day met night, Pavlo did not show himself, and so we had to take lodging and a meal in this inn a short walk from our disembarkation point. Marta, during our passage I thought of you constantly. How you manage with our own 6 children, I do not know. Please kiss Fedko, Nicola, Maria, Anna, and the twins Vasil and Hritz for me. Tell them that their father is hard at work far away. I pray that you all believe me, for as surely as Pavlo will appear later on this day, so too will we meet soon with a better future. If only you would agree to follow me here. I've been thinking that I could lodge with Pavlo and the girls for a while, find work, establish myself, and then I will send for all of you. For now, forgive me. With all my love and consideration, Mikhail, Buenos Aires, November 5th, 1937. You've been listening to Vasil Popadyuk. The album is called Violuminosity. The melody is Adios Norino.
My dear Mikhailo, I am pleased for you that you are well and safe. It has been 6 months since you left. In your absence, the children and I are doing our best to remain strong and productive. Fedyr is showing an aptitude for agronomy. He wants to invent a hardier variant of grain when he finishes school. He's also learning lantern signals and soon will work at the level crossing on the escarpment, although I do worry about him there alone at night. Mikola has no interest in trains or books. He is strong and loves the outdoors, and so I have put him to work on our neighbor's yard. Both he and Fedyr bring me their modest earnings, and I can make do for now tending our own soil. Maria discovered one of your razors and tried to sharpen her pencil with it. The poor child could have cut herself badly. No harm. However, the fragile blade is no longer whole and it will be of no use to you. Maria takes care of little Anna and the twins while I work. She will complete her 5th grade this spring and wants to sew. I have arranged to have her apprentice with Ivan Musny, the tailor. The little ones are doing well. None of us are the same without you. Dear husband, surely your duty to your brother is done. Your letter asks me to kiss your children. It is you who should return with haste to kiss them. Marta.
Dearest Marta, not long after I arrived, I came to understand that the welcome that I felt this country offered foreigners was conditional. That condition being that I was a visitor and that I should not be allowed to even take meager work away from a single Argentinian. Farms that only last year prospered are no longer profitable. England had promised to welcome Argentinian products, but has now imposed tariffs to protect its own economy. People here are migrating from their farms into the city. Late last year, around the time of the election, there was an attempted people's uprising. But I have good news, Marta. My uncle in Canada has invited me to visit, and he says he can provide me with work at a bakery. I'm making my way to Toronto, and I will write you once I inquire about permanent settlement and bringing our family there. Yours faithfully, Mikhailo.
Dear husband, I wake at night and feel the darkness around me, and I know not where you are or what has happened to the man I married. Once again, here I am, stuffing my heart into this envelope. To say that I love you is like saying nothing, for I don't know if you love me enough to return. From me to you, the road is so far. If I were a different person, I would fly like an arrow to be with you. But I cannot be someone I am not. Even if war is to surround us, I feel safer here in our village, where we can grow our own food, than on some foreign shore, knowing neither language nor neighbor. As for you, do what you want. My prayers and heart are needed elsewhere with our 6 children. Marta.
Скільки слів даремних придумали поети, навкруги так темно, я не знаю, де ти. Сльози діаманти і серця в конвертах не лишають шансів, ранок мусить вмерти. Сказати люблю, не сказати нічого, від мене до тебе довга дорога, зірватися вниз, летіти стрілою, щоб бути з тобою, з тобою. Сказати люблю, це не сказати нічого, від мене до тебе така довга дорога, зірватися вниз, летіти стрілою, щоб бути з тобою, з тобою.
Віктор Венник, бути з тобою, to be with you. As I write this script, it is 2022. Just to the left of my computer screen, there is a portrait of a well-dressed, mustachioed man sitting in an ornate wooden chair. The inscription on the matting indicates that the photo was taken at the Europe Studio, 615 Queen Street West in Toronto. That man, Mikhail, or Mikhailo Lascu, my grandfather, would work in a bakery for a few months in Toronto, and then he would return to Ukraine, never to leave again, leaving me to marvel that I am even here today in Canada. My mother recalled she did not recognize her father when a well-dressed traveler appeared suddenly in the doorway of her childhood home. Decades later, I would meet both of my mother's parents, all of her brothers and one sister too. By now there were 7 siblings. The youngest, Pavlo, was born a few years after my grandfather's return. He would graduate to become a doctor. Oldest brother, Fedir, did go on to study soil sciences, and he became an agronomist. Among her gifts, my mother presented one to my grandfather. It was packaged in a slim box. Inside was an old-fashioned men's straight razor. And he smiled when she told him that this was to replace the one she had ruined as a girl while sharpening her pencils for school. Nasha Kasha comes to you from Radio Western 94.9 FM on the campus of Western University in London, Ontario, Canada. We're heard on CHMR 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland, on CKDU 88.1 FM in Halifax, on Local 107.3 FM in St. John, New Brunswick, on CJAS Radio 93.5 FM in Saint Augustine, Quebec, on CJLO 1690 AM in Montreal, on CFRC 101.9 FM in Kingston, on CFMU 93.3 FM in Hamilton, on CKMS 102.7 FM in Kitchener-Waterloo, on CJAM 99.1 FM in Windsor and Detroit, on CKLU 96.7 FM in Sudbury, on CILU 102.7 FM in Thunder Bay, on 101.5 UMFM in Winnipeg, on CJTR 91.3 FM in Regina, on CFMQ 98.1 FM in Hudson Bay, Saskatchewan, on CFBX 92.5 FM in Kamloops, on CJSF 90.1 FM in Vancouver, and on CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo, British Columbia. Brandon, Manitoba born, Los Angeles resident, Evan Wish, playing his composition, Carousel. Chances taken, choices made. My grandparents made their decisions in a time not unlike what Ukraine is facing today, a regional power bent on expansion and domination of its neighbors' lands. Their children, the generation my parents came from, had to survive what followed. My father's father was a Sikh rifleman who returned after the First World War to discover that his wife had died, leaving their only child, a daughter, to subsist on the kindness of neighbors and relatives. That soldier would remarry quickly. My father was the middle child of his second wife. With so little land and even less money, my father survived on his wits, crafting wooden toys for Jewish children in his class. They would trade him for their potato latkes, pancakes. With no prospects at 17, he answered a recruiter's call to become a farm laborer in Germany. War had not yet broken out. His mother was so upset she refused to say goodbye to him. It was a hurt that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. He would never see his parents again. Quote, Nazi racial doctrine held that all Slavs were subhumans, Untermenschen, and that their only role was to serve the German master race. End of quote. So wrote Orest Subtelny in his book Ukraine, a History on page 467. Ukrainians were rounded up for slave labor. My mother was 18 in 1942 when a village administration lackey and a German soldier had her shaken out of her sleep. At dawn, she was marched to a village hall where, under lock and key, she and 3 other women were kept. A freight train would take them to Germany. She remembers being able to sit from time to time on her wooden suitcase. In Germany, she subsisted with other slave laborers in a large converted coal storage building. Her assigned factory produced canteens, pots, and pails. Her meal was a ladle of soup. They were keeping them alive to work. 3 years later, the Americans freed her, and she found herself working in an army kitchen. The Americans were advancing, and that only took her closer to the front. Much later in life, she did receive a small regular stipend from the German government for the indignity of imprisonment and forced labor. My mother found her way to a Polish displaced persons camp. Now, with the war over, the Soviets were encouraging their allies to help them repatriate those who had left the Soviet Union during the war. Na rodinu was their slogan, a return to homeland and families. My mother and some camp friends thought they were doing the right thing, following their hearts. They had packed their bags, loaded them onto the back of a truck, and were awaiting the driver. He would take them on the first leg of their journey back to their families. A young Polish woman named Janka Podgorska spotted them and ran over. Janka began scolding my mother and the others for their blind sentimentality and recklessness. She had survived the forced labor and the bombs. It would be unwise to tempt fate by returning to her village so soon in the midst of so much political uncertainty, Janka told them. Then Janka climbed onto the flatbed truck, and she threw down my mother's wooden suitcase. It was a move that, quote, combined dash, inspiration, and flying, and the Polish people have a word for it. Polot. So writes author Eva Hoffman in her book Lost in Translation on page 71. Then on page 154, quote, what being human is really about is having fire, flare, a holy spark of inspiration. It should make all our movements forceful, artful, musical. Janka was such a person, the personification of Polot. My mother would often tell the story, calling Janka her angel. Some of her campmates did leave for home that noon hour. My mother stayed. I was 19 when my mother and I traveled to then Soviet Ukraine, and we met with some of the women who had returned. It was a remarkable contrast of fates that I witnessed on that day, and I will never forget the power of an instant to change lives, the power of one person to make a difference. There is an underpinning of fearlessness to Polot, and I will do my best to chase this spirit down now that Eva Hoffman has given me a word to name it.
Oh motherland, home sweet home you ring. Your green mountains sing to me like deer pine for spring. Bitter tears come to my eyes, but joy swells deep inside me when I dream sweet memories of you. I am blessed by thee. Bitter tears come to my eyes, but joy swells deep inside me when I dream sweet memories of you. I am blessed by thee. Geschenken, Bochnad, Nabi.
Luba Mason is a Broadway singer of Slovak descent, and this was her song, Motherland. After the war, my father received his resettlement papers from the Office of the Military Governor for the U.S. Zone of Germany in Frankfurt. That was in July 12, 1947. Mykola Andrusiak is listed as a lumberman. He had signed on to fell trees for the Abitibi Power and Paper Company. He would be heading for the Canadian forests of northern Ontario. The site was called Mini Puka. Minipuka had previously served as a prisoner of war camp. A cloth merchant would visit that camp to take measurements. He would offer to tailor each man a suit. A few weeks later, he would deliver that garment. My father would photograph his campmates individually posing in their newly acquired attire. Each man wanted to send just such a picture home to his family. He took at least one group photo that I still possess. There are 8 men posing, and he must have used the camera's timer because my father is in the shot, kneeling in the front row on the right, sort of genuflecting with one knee in the snow, probably on a handkerchief that is out of sight. 3 of the men in the back row are sporting fedoras jauntily tipped to one side. Shirts, ties, suits, all of these guys are leaning into their futures. Mikola made his way to Montreal when the lumber camp contract had been fulfilled. He found work on a cargo ship that brought cane from Bermuda and from other islands in the British West Indies to the Redpath sugar refinery in Montreal. This work could only take place during the months when the St. Lawrence River was free of ice. Father's ship was the 336 feet long SS Canadian Highlander, which was owned by Canada National Steamships. The Highlander was built in Canada after the Second World War. It's part of a fleet named to reflect the pride of this country at that time. Sister ships of the same vintage sported the names Conqueror, Leader, Observer, Victor. My father maintained the diesel and electric systems aboard the Highlander. He received his seaman's certificate of discharge, which vouches for his, quote, good conduct and ability, end quote, and he disembarked for good on November 22, 1949, having decided his prospects would be steadier on land. My father would augment his shipboard engine room experience, paying a tutor to translate what he himself as of yet could not comprehend of the English language. He took a class and completed his stationary engineman's certificate. Now he was qualified to work with factory furnaces and large boilers. Maria Lescu was brought to Canada to work as a domestic worker, which meant for her that she helped care for 3 children, Timmy, Bonnie, and Christopher Carnell. Their father was a manager at a downtown department store. The Carnells lived in Hampstead, a well-to-do Montreal neighborhood. She would supplement that income cleaning with a friend in a bank building at night. It was the autumn of 1949. My father and his mentor and best friend, Ivan Zubagne, attended a dance in Montreal. That night he climbed onto a chair and, like some ancient mariner swaying from the crow's nest, my father scanned the hall. Having sighted a slim brunette, this sailor boy announced to his friend, and probably to whoever else was in earshot, that he would marry that girl someday soon. I was born at the Royal Victoria Hospital the following August, and Ivan Zubagne, well, he would be my godfather. You are listening to Karissa Klopushchak with Tut Itam. My mother was nimble with a thimble. I was 2 when she found work at the Sunrose Garment Factory on the Rue Saint-Laurent. Duluth Street runs perpendicular to it, and our 3rd-floor apartment was about 5 blocks to the east. It was only 8 blocks in all from our front door to her factory. She could have walked it easily, but with me in tow she had to take a detour every weekday morning. We would clamber onto the number 55 bus for 3 stops. Disembarking at Prince Arthur, she and I would schlep west on foot to Rue Saint-Famille. In among oak and maple trees sat a 3-story Victorian row house. It was a daycare run by nuns, and I loved going there. Back then, my mother earned 75 cents for completing a dress. Skirts were 25 cents each, 27 if they had pockets. My mother would aim to sew 3 completed skirts every hour. The owner and many of her co-workers spoke Polish, a language she had been taught back in Ukraine. Her workday complete, she would hurry back to the daycare and collect me. As one warm summer's afternoon folded into early evening, we returned to our apartment. As per usual, she set me on our rear balcony, which was a place of dread for me. Open to the sky, she never imagined that large black birds could accost me, but I was positive that they could and would at any moment. Their battle cries jabbed at my ears. "Sika! Sika! Sika!" they whooped gloatingly. I froze in fear at first, calling for her, but to no effect. I must have rattled the latch on the kitchen door, and it sprang free. I crossed the threshold to safety. The kitchen air was moist, mingled with the scent of dill and beets together with a simmering soup bone sitting atop a gas stove. Mama had missed my return, missed me standing tall on toe tips. She did not see me reaching for the pot of deep red contents or me bringing it all down upon my head and shoulders. Scalded, screaming, she tried to comfort me, called a cab, and rushed me to Hotel Dieu Hospital. The outcome was neither tragic nor lasting. I would learn that the "Ka, sika" was actually French-speaking children across the laneway beckoning me, "Hey, ptsiga, ptsiga." They had been calling me "Ptsiga" is French for little guy. "Hey, ptsiga, hey, little guy, come play with us." By way of a postscript, I do love borscht. You might say I was baptized in it. This is John Stetch performing his composition and arrangement called Zabava. It's from Golden Harvest, a musical celebration of Ukrainian Canadiana. Also from that same compilation, Ishumit Ihude by the Prince Albert Veselka Choir. Earlier in the program, Marta's letters to Mikhail were read by Larissa Yemets-Andrusiak, my wife. Partial funding for Nasha Kasha has been provided by the Shevchenko Foundation and by the Ukrainian Credit Union. I'm your reporter Stefan Andrusiak. Back in a week, God willing. До милої зустрічі за тиждень часу, дорогі слухачі.